Very good morning to you all. Welcome to the final day of the IEEFA Energy Finance Conference 2024. Thank you once again for joining us at today's event, which aims to provide a venue for energy and financial experts like yourselves, community leaders, environmental advocates, investors, philanthropists, and journalists from all around the world to talk about how we can further accelerate the energy transition in Asia. My name is Tamina Kausji, and it's an absolute pleasure to be taking you through today's proceedings as well as your MC. For better engagement, kindly do ensure that you have downloaded the Hoover app, where you can be updated about all things conference related, connect with your fellow delegates, both those who are joining in person as well as those who are joining us on the Hoover live stream, and also to be asking any questions which you have of all the fantastic speakers we'll be featuring on today's main stage. Now, for your social media posts, you can also use the hashtag EnergyFinance2024. The account to tag both on X as well as LinkedIn is at IEEFA_Asia Pacific. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with our very first session for today, which is all about regional energy transition and success stories. I'd like to now introduce Ajaita Shah, founder and CEO of Frontier Markets, here to share the work she leads, Bharat, with inclusive climate solutions. Ajaita, over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to move away just a little bit. Good morning, everyone. Some of you had your coffee, but I promise you'll all be energized by the time I'm done. I promise this. What an honor to be here, by the way, and congratulations to IEEFA for hosting something that I think is so critically important, where we as the South-South region, Southeast Asia, South Asia, come together to really talk about I think the critical components of where renewable energy and transition plays a role in the larger nexus of climate. I think in the last couple of days, from what I understand, and is that, you know, not only are there like 20 plus countries that have come together to have this conversation, but we've also talked a lot more around a global corporate perspective around where businesses can come together looking at renewable energy. But I'm going to give you a perspective that comes very close to me and my heart, which is around the masses. So coming in from a quick lens is what happens when we as a region, if I look at South Asia in itself, it's 2 billion people. And if we add Southeast Asia, we're 3.5 billion people. What happens when 3.5 billion people also drink the juice that we've all obviously drank in the morning to get here in the first place, and actually start thinking about the power that we have to make changes happen in a very different way, especially when it comes to climate. So I'm going to give you all that perspective of where I'm coming from the work that I do. Okay. I hate this slide. This is my least favorite slide in life. This is my journey. But just so you know, I've spent the last 20 years working in rural India, where I've been obsessed with the idea of trying to understand how do we look at the masses as a market, and how do we understand the opportunities that lie in the challenges that exist in the countries that we operate in. When we look at this in the context of rural India, we're looking at this with 700,000 villages, 800 million people that do not necessarily have access to quality services that allows them to become the powerhouses that they can be. So I spent an entire career building a company that basically wanted to bridge that gap, helping rural India be seen as not beneficiaries or poor burdened people, but actually as markets. And really trying to understand how do we see markets differently? If you see someone that doesn't have access to electricity, for example, that's not a challenge that is a impact story only, it's an opportunity. I think given that the work that all of us have been talking about for the last couple of days, we see that. How do you replace kerosene and bring in a solar light? But when you bring in a solar light to like billions of people, that's a market, that's money, but it's also impact in a very different way. So in my journey, I set up Frontier Markets to bridge that gap, and we've evolved into a company that is the first ever tech-oriented platform that works with rural women entrepreneurs and bridges that gap to understand how to actually understand who rural consumers are and understand what their needs can be, and how do you bridge that gap with services that come in a different way. I'll give you some fun numbers. Today, we have 40,000 women entrepreneurs that are in India that are using a technology platform that have helped over 7 million families, or 7 million people, 1 million families, get access to 100+ million solutions relating towards their needs. So whether that's clean energy products, whether that's climate-friendly solutions, whether that's digital payments, whether that's essential services, et cetera, et cetera. But the most important element of this in my mind was the fact that we're reaching remote villages in the country. Now, everyone gets really excited by these numbers. I think that it's pathetic because we're talking about 700,000 villages. I've only touched 5,000. So there's a lot more to do, right? But the fact is that there's a dent of proving that if you invest in women, you invest in the problems that people have, and you look at rural markets as opportunities, there's a beautiful transition that can happen where we can create impact, we can change the planet, and we can do things in a very different way. So let me give this in perspective. In rural India's context, right? I think a lot of us have talked about the impact challenges, right? Climate has become a very important and challenging reality for rural India in a big way, right? Whether it's floods, it's droughts, it's systems, it's heat. There's a lot of things that happen in a very intense way. And so I would look at this from a business perspective, and I would say not only is there people loss, but there's business loss that happens on an annual basis because we're not paying attention to how we can fix this. Rural communities, where the masses exist, actually are ready to be a part of a system or a change. The difference is, or the challenge is, that we don't understand that they don't know. They don't know what the opportunities are. They don't understand how to reach solutions in the right way. There is an affordability gap because we're not looking at this with the lens of economies of scale. And on a fundamental level, there is an opportunity to bring people in, but they're not a part of this dialogue right now in a way that I think can be powerful. Now, put this in a market perspective for a second. The companies of the world that want to create cool solutions, cool renewable energy solutions, also have a problem. Because not only do they not understand this rural consumer, they actually don't understand the opportunity. So there's a design gap, there's an insights gap, there's an access gap. My favorite quote of life is, it's too expensive to reach rural markets. It's too difficult to take a bet to rural markets because these people are poor. We create all these products, no one buys it. And on a fundamental level, this is why we don't make money. These are all false perceptions when you start thinking about how you bridge the gap in a very different way. And I will tell you that I strongly believe, proven in my own journey, that women will change this. Because rural women in India actually are the ones that understand the opportunity, understand the struggles and the central realities of change, but most importantly, they will be the ones that bridge that gap in a very different way. If you think about companies wanting to understand insights, wanting to understand market opportunity, wanting to understand needs, wanting to understand challenges, women are at the center of this. And why are they at the center of this? We've always had this narrative, which many of you know has bothered me. The narrative is, because she's in the center of challenges, she's the poor person we need to fix. Actually, the narrative is different. Because she's at the center of this, she understands the pain and is ready to be the solution faster and better than anyone else in the center of these systems. She is the influencer. She is the household decision maker. She is the person that actually understands the nexus between climate and behavior change in a very different way. How do we harness her center and her understanding of these things in a way that allows us to make her become our weapon of change? And that's what we did. So at Frontier Markets, we looked at these women in a very different lens. We said, in every single village, there's a leader, there's a person that understands these things. How do we make her become the influencer, the facilitator, the leader of the country, and link her to her world? And her world is who? People she's known forever, right? Look at the rural market. They can be consumers, they can be farmers, they can be enablers, they can be entrepreneurs. They are people that essentially run different businesses. I've heard yesterday in some of my remote conversations around why MSME is the place we want to bring in renewable energy. Guess who runs a shop? So look at the lens in a different way when you're talking about billions of people, and bring in technology and bring in an assisted commerce system. So we built a technology that was designed to help and ensure how you get data real time, contextually, and properly to understand what are the needs of the ground. You can't come in as a solution provider, and I'm sure there's many of you in the room right now that are solution providers or funders, without understanding the problem in its context and its reality, because it's ever changing. And thinking about this at a mass level. But if you do this well, you bring out a platform, all of a sudden on the supply side, you become the platform that allows all these systems to come in a very different way. So today, we work with agriculture companies, renewable energy companies, we work with e-commerce companies, we work with digital payment banks, we work with like everyone, because we realize once you are the pipe to understand the opportunity, you can suddenly design very differently and create markets at scale. So the tech for me was really important, right? India's had its own boom, right, since demonetization and life. And so just put this in perspective, it's been 20 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in rural India. And 2017-18 was the game changer. It was a clincher, right? Internet connectivity, different access in a different way, and a different system that can be game changing if we harness efficiencies. However, we had to understand what we were designing. So fintechs, ag techs, clean techs, health techs, all the techs that are out there will never make any sense if you don't understand the crux of what rural India is. And for rural India, it was about designing a platform that was going to be central to women. So our technology today is not just a marketplace. It's not just an e-commerce solution. It is actually the go-to place where women can do their work and actually leverage their assets. You can help them collect data in real time. You can help them understand. Someone came to me the other day and said, Ajaita, how do we help women farmers get access to finance? And my obvious question was, do you know who a woman farmer is? Do you understand her climate challenges? Do you understand that the solution cannot just be finance, but it needs to be a bundled collaboration? And how do you bundle collaborations if you don't know who your market is? And I think this is where the tech became a very different place. It's the first AI vernacular local trading bot system, but it's designed for women who have now in their villages gotten a PhD because they're seen to be the most technically savvy women that connect systems to markets in a different way. Using that technology, what you do is in a partnership model, and this is what I think is really exciting, is you bring women at the center of this, you give them the right technology, but then you work with the right solution providers to start thinking about what is the potential of solutions in market at scale. And I think many of you are funders in the room, and we've been having these conversations around what is innovative finance, catalytic capital, blended finance, fun phrases. I'll give you a tangible example of what this is. So imagine we are a platform that has 40,000 women entrepreneurs that are reaching out to 10 million people in India. And we can answer or ask any question in the world that matters and start designing things that are centered around the crux of the problem or the people and creating economies of scale that could be game-changing if done correctly. But there's an in-between challenge. The in-between challenge is who pays for it, who takes on the risks, who's gonna be innovative, who's gonna invest in these women, who's gonna be okay with failing, who's gonna understand whether or not a clean tech company that wants to create a solar induction cook stove to be able to then try to create a carbon economy for billions of people, who takes that risk? And that's where blended capital comes in. And so we basically said, let's take grant funding differently. Let's bring in risk capital differently if your intentionality is to unlock the potential of design scale in a very different way. So step one, build the capacity of these women because they're amazing. Give them the technology that makes sense. Step two, work with the organizations that actually want to create big markets and change in our renewable energy space. Step three, design, test, and deliver it. And then step four, scale it. And I think that's really what we've been able to do in a very successful way. Today, we work with about 210 different companies that have actually been able to design innovation. I was famous for knowing how to bring in washing machines into rural India. No one ever thought washing machines would come to rural India. And you have to understand when you spend 20 years talking to millions of women, looking in the eyes, and they go, don't tell me what to do. I know how to use my power. And I think that's the game changer when we start thinking about life and systems in a different way. So how did I link this? And why was I so excited to be a part of this event? Because I think that as an industry, we end up thinking about things in an unfortunate way. We think about things in silos. Renewable energy has its own space. Climate has its own space. Just transition has its own space. Climate justice has its own space. Climate finance has its own space. Renewable energy finance has its own space. The fact of the matter is it's all interconnected. And if you start thinking about this with a market lens and a very different level of the masses, and put this with the gender lens, our thesis at Frontier Markets has been, how do we elevate the potential of the masses, looking at things with a combination perspective, not a silo perspective. So how do we help bring in an initiative that is about India, it's about rural women, it's about climate, and then understanding where renewable energy comes in a different way. So we launched 2 years ago at the World Economic Forum, the She Leads Bharat initiative, which really was how do 1 million women entrepreneurs help 100 million people be seen in a very different way when it comes to inclusivity, access, and market and change. And as I launched this, I realized everyone's like, well, Ajaita, what about gender equality? What about healthcare? What about financial inclusion? And most importantly, what about climate? And having done the work that I've done in renewable energy for a very long time, I said, right, how have we not made a dent in renewable energy at scale in India in a way that would be game-changing? But also, how do we become the role models for access to change in Southeast Asia and South Asia as a region? Because we, again, represent billions of people. And how do we make that change happen? And so last year, or this year, I guess, I thought about this a lot, and I launched something called the She Leads Bharat Inclusive Climate Solutions Initiative, which basically is going to be about taking a shared platform, helping companies that have solutions, investors that have capital, policy and organizations that believe in gender, to come together to test, to design, test, and deliver better solutions at scale so we can actually create that dent in a very different way. And the focus when I think about this in terms of renewable energy has been two areas. It's been about mitigation and it's about regenerative income. Because actually when you look at this, there of course is a mitigation opportunity, right? Whether it's India or whether it's Asia or whether it's Global South, on a fundamental level, we're not necessarily best equipped in terms of infrastructure to really take levels at scale. However, we also need to understand that there is infrastructure, right? India has gone through its own evolution in a really crazy way. I brought in solar lights. I've sold, I think, close to 50 million solar lights in the country when I first started, when it was an energy access challenge. That has changed in India in a really important way that we have to accept and understand. People don't need indoor lighting anymore in the same way. But people do need electricity in a different way. People need to be productive in a different way. And as you start thinking about productivity and systems, let's understand, because the grid is there, we have to think about things differently. I think I was talking to a colleague yesterday, we're talking about where it's not just about renewable energy, but it's about energy efficiency. How do you ensure that a fan that is supposed to be critical in a rural house today that now is sitting in an environment where it's 35 to 40 degrees Celsius plus, gets an opportunity to function a fan that is not 20 watts, but is 3 watts, right? And an efficiency perspective, because they have grid. How do we look at things that are looking at productivity of products? So appliances. I can be an agri-entrepreneur that wants to diversify my income and actually work on bringing in new organic, because obviously that's the height of the land, right? Haldi has become the most famous, turmeric has become the most famous product, and all of us being Asia, we can joke around about this and say that this is like the old school product that we all knew our entire lives, but it's becoming a marketable solution for the world. How do we equip our farmers to become more effective? We unfortunately keep saying, oh, let's solarize the product. It's not about solarizing the product. It's about understanding why the solar product will become having your cake and eating it too. How do you help people embrace and embody a solution that will also help you change your climate footprint? Because when 1 billion people or 10 million people, forget 1 billion, even if 10 million women suddenly were paid to use solar products to be more effective and change in a very different way, you would have a carbon emission breakdown that would be game-changing, but we're not paying them. We're telling them that this is for their own good, and let's be honest, it's not. Then there's regenerative income. And I think regenerative income, so mitigation of climate has been a challenge in my mind because I don't think renewable energy, and I'm being controversial right now for the Renewable Energy Conference, I don't think renewable energy is a climate mitigation solver. It's not. Because there's an infrastructure and a reality that is different that doesn't affect people on mitigation. Climate resilience is about insurance. It's about finance. It's about understanding better seeds and better systems that will allow people to deal with the climate calamities that come in together. And this is the problem that we have right now. But renewable energy is an incredibly interesting space for regenerative income where we can pay people to be better and think about this as a mass economy in a very different way. And if you start understanding how to design differently, you think about what 10 million or 100 million people, if incentivized to change their behavior, can do in terms of carbon emission. Think about markets. Think about systems. It's a very different change. So, last thing I'll say is that we look at this with 3 areas, agency, capital, and renewable energy. So there's a gap, right? As we're thinking about how to bridge this, how do we unlock this opportunity to have billions of people be a part of a mass movement that creates markets and changes the game in a very interesting way? We need to do our job and create agency, see people, get that data, create awareness in a very different way. I do believe that it's about a bundled solution. It's not just about the product, but it's about the infrastructure. So where does insurance and finance come in interestingly? And how do we think about finance in a very different way? I think the earlier conversation that we were just having, which is around how do you think about not subsidy being a bad thing, but think about subsidy as an incentive in a very different way. How do you think about the fact that if you want to de-risk markets, you think about de-risking markets in the world that capital plays in a very different way. And I think this is an opportunity that I think all of us as an industry can do magic with. And of course, where does the renewable energy in our perspective come in, or my perspective come in? It comes in with the lens of gender, it comes in with the lens of agri, it comes in the lens of mass market. And if you look at renewable energy and the opportunity, we're talking about decentralized renewable energy solutions, we're talking about mass solutions. I work in Rajasthan, and in Rajasthan, the reason I started my company 12 years ago was because I knew that there was a gap in terms of where electrification access was. But in the last 10 years, 12 years, governments have invested in distributed solar power. They've invested in parks. They've invested in systems. How do you harness that and take it to another level in terms of the masses? So when we think about the fact that there's 500 million farmers in the country, how do we understand harnessing their capability in a very different way that feeds not just our country, but becomes a role model for the world? And so here's my call to action and participation in how I think about things is it's time. You know, I won the Schwab Award this last year, and I said that this is gonna be the moment that we bring everything together. We bring together gender, we bring together masses, we bring together technology, we bring together partnerships in a very different way. And the partnership of what we want to bring together is going to be about people coming together as funders, as innovators, as ecosystem enablers, as accelerators, where how do we design collectively based on an understanding of where we can be and how we make this happen. So you are the first to hear our launch of the She Leads Bharat Inclusive Climate Fund that brings together these partnerships. I'm super honored and excited to be a part of this launch of IEEFA, because I think it's such a great place to kind of think about things. And I hope that we, being in our region, come together in a very different way, I hope all of you looking at this going, who am I? Am I a solutions provider? Am I a funder? Am I a channel partner because I have access to massive communities? Or am I someone that has money that wants to make things matter in a different way? Talk to me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ajaita.